Well, let's get some analysis on this now. Richard Johnson, US politics lecturer at Queen Mary University, joins us now from London. Good to have you with us, Richard. So, expecting Juan Merchan to issue a unconditional discharge in the sentencing for Trump today. Just explain to us what that means exactly.
What that means is that the state of New York has determined that it is not in the interests of the state to incarcerate the felon. But this is not an overturning of the jury's decision. Trump will remain a felon. Being a felon carries certain penalties. It would restrict Trump from ever serving on a jury in the state of New York. It could restrict his access if he wanted to buy a firearm, and actually it could also restrict his travel. Now, this was a particularly curious one because Trump is not the first president to have a criminal record. George W. Bush had a criminal record, but for a misdemeanor. He had pled guilty to drunken driving back in the 1970s. And when Bush was elected, there was some discussion that he was applying for waivers to gain visa-free access to travel to Canada. Now, I'm not sure how serious that ended up being, whether Canada would have looked into that. But when you travel abroad and you get visa waivers to certain countries that are friendly to the United States, you have to declare on that you don't have a criminal record. And Donald Trump, of course, would have to declare that he was a felon, which would complicate that. So we'll have to see in practice whether that means anything. But Trump remains a felon, even if he does get this unconditional discharge.
Yeah, Trump very much not going off scot-free here. Richard, we saw from that Supreme Court ruling that two conservative justices sided with liberal justices to go ahead with that sentencing from Juan Merchan today. The fact that that happened does go some way to show that nobody is above the law, doesn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, the Supreme Court is a court that is strongly shaped by the ideological interpretations that the justices apply to the Constitution, and that tends to align quite strongly with the party of the president who appointed them. But I think it isn't accurate to say that the Supreme Court members are purely partisans and rogues. That is to say that they act purely on the basis of what the interest of the party is that appoints them. Now, some might form judgments that are closer to that than others, but basically, once you're on the Supreme Court, you're there for life, and it's extremely rare in American history for Congress to remove a member of the court. They have to go through the impeachment process, which would require 2/3 consensus in the Senate, which would be unlikely to be found for a particular judge on the basis of their political leaning. So in a sense, they are much more insulated and protected from partisan punishment, say, in the way that a member of Congress is. If they step out of line against Trump, they could lose a primary election. Well, that isn't something that Supreme Court justices have to think about. So they do exercise greater independence from the party that put them into office than I think sometimes people expect.
And Trump has recently claimed that Juan Merchan is trying to embarrass him. Do you think that this is an embarrassment for Trump? How embarrassing is this for him?
Of course, it is embarrassing for, I think, anyone to have a criminal conviction, particularly given the circumstances of this criminal conviction, which are rooted in allegations about marital infidelity that Trump denies. But of course, that's not quite what the jury came to believe. Whether this has larger political ramifications, I'm less sure. I don't think that Trump supporters have shown that they are particularly moved by this in any way. Trump's claims that this is lawfare against him, that this is a stitch-up, have been received quite well by Republican voters. And so I think this is another example of how the United States is such a strongly divided country at the moment, and that people interpret the events around them through a partisan lens. And so Democrats will look at this and it will confirm to them that they view Judge as unsuited character to be president of the United States. And Republicans will look at this and see Democratic elected prosecutors moving against a president they didn't like in a jurisdiction that's heavily democratic. And at the end of the day, I think in terms of the political ramifications, it'll be a bit of a wash.
And of course, Richard, this wasn't the only case against Trump. It's the only one to have reached a conclusion now. Tell us how unprecedented it is for Trump to now be returning to the White House after effectively defying 4 criminal cases.
Well, it is remarkable how Trump has been able to navigate the legal jeopardy that he faced. Of course, running for president did provide him with a degree of protection because, at the very least, his presidential campaigns caused the different courts to delay proceedings in some matters. But also Trump was strongly helped by the intervention of the Supreme Court in the summer in the Trump v. United States case, which said that the president is immune, not just this president, any president, is immune from prosecution for official acts that they conducted as president. Now, this particular New York case is of a different character because this refers to actions that were alleged and found to have taken place in the 2016 presidential election before Trump was elected president. But the actions, say, relating to the 6th of January 2021 and so on, these pertain to when Trump was president, and the Supreme Court has given him immunity. Now, that is quite extraordinary. Now, what I would say on the other side is, of course, Joe Biden may be grateful for that Supreme Court case in the coming months and years, as it does protect him from legal lawfare or actions taken against him by Republican prosecutors who may be unhappy with the things that he did when he was president.
And finally, Richard, I did want to get your thoughts on this so-called expansionist agenda that Trump has been pushing in recent days, talking about taking over Greenland, absorbing Canada. Tell us your thoughts on this agenda that he's been pushing.
Well, I think in many ways this is classic Trump negotiation tactics. Trump has known throughout his business career, this long predates his political career, that you ask for the impossible and then you might get more than you ever bargained that you would plausibly have gotten otherwise. And I look at the wild ambitions of Trump with respect to Greenland or Panama or Canada, and I think few expect that any of those will become territories of the United States. But what it has done is, it's headline grabbing, so it has brought attention to certain issues that Trump cares deeply about, whether that's trade or competition with, in the case of China, or competition with China in the case of the Panama Canal, or U.S. strategic defense in the case of Greenland. And secondly, what it's done, I suppose, is it has put pressure on those on the respective governments that are in charge of those territories to consider how or to raise the political stakes against them should they not take action in a direction closer to what Trump wants to take. You know, Trump could have said to Denmark, I want you to increase your defense spending. And maybe Denmark would have. But if Trump says, well, if you don't increase your defense spending, we're going to take Greenland, well, it's not likely that Trump would take Greenland, but it shows to Denmark how serious or how important this issue is to Trump, and it may cause them to move a bit more in the direction of travel that Trump wants to see them.
Richard Johnson, US politics lecturer, thanks so much for joining us. Really good to get your insight there.
Thank you.